So this is the BlackMagic Design 6K Pro, and I pretty much love it and hate it at the same time. When BlackMagic Design released the BMPCC 4K, cinematographers all around the world lost their heads, knowing how the top engineers who design and build cinema-grade cameras made it accessible to the average consumer. But little to behold, it wasn't perfect, especially concerning its battery life that was fitted with the LPE6 batteries. Quite the letdown when you can't even record more than 30 minutes on a single charge. Yet in some cases, image quality somehow always triumphs even the biggest of flaws. So for better or for worse, cinematographers and camera enthusiasts alike understood that by rigging the BMPCCs and adding external SSDs are the only way to go. And here we are a few years later with the BlackMagic 6K Pro. So what's the difference, you may ask? Well, for one, 6K recording obviously, and also built-in ND filters. So today we're going to go through the experience using the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema 6K Pro and how it could serve you as your daily shooter, and also how easily this could get in the way if you're not prepared for its demands. So let's dive in as to why I think this is the best camera you can get under $2,500. For starters, the 6K Pro has the best frame rate options available on the market at this price range. Just like the 6K version, the 6K Pro can record up to 6K or 4K at 50 or 60 frames per second, and 2.8K up to 120 frames per second. All of which can be done in RAW formats in one of 8 different compression rates. There's also ProRes recording, which takes the full 6K resolution and downscales it to 4K at up to 60 FPS or 1080p to 120 frames per second, which gets highly useful if you need a tighter shot when shooting in ProRes. You can choose the native 6K sensor area or crop in to 2.8K. From an ergonomic standpoint, it really does take some getting used to, but definitely has a nice updated display from the BMPCC 4K, which had a fixed position. So viewing and changing settings with the new folding rear display is incredible to use, especially if you're coming from the older models. But I'll get to the body in just a bit. There's also the option to add an EVF on the top of the camera for just $500, which should help in compositioning your shots better in very bright daylight solutions. But let me get to the second most desirable part of this camera, which are its built-in ND filters. So you no longer have to carry those pesky filters around anymore. I mean, from my general knowledge for a camera that shoots RAW and has built-in NDs, that's really hard to come by. To which you can choose between 2, 4, and 6 stops, even while you're recording. In front of those NDs, we have a Canon AEF mount, which allows you to control your lens functions, but unfortunately, like the other pocket cinema cameras, continuous autofocus isn't supported. The 6K Pro has a super 35mm sensor with dual native ISO of 400 and 3200. This results in better dynamic range and low light performance, which tops at 25,600 ISO. But when you push it above 5,000 ISO, that's when things start to get a bit grainy. In the image quality department, however, things are looking great. Dynamic range is fantastic, as shown from the yoga shots we had in the opening sequence of this video. And the BlackMagic Color Science version 5 is a dream to work with. Using some pre-LUTs in camera or in post is quite easy to work with, and the amount of control you have to manipulate colors is truly a video editor's dream, or a nightmare if you don't have the right machine to process 6K footage. And now we have arrived at parts where I just didn't like about the 6K Pro. Starting off with the weight and size of this camera. The 6K Pro weighs 2.73 pounds, and while that's not much, the uneven shape makes holding onto this camera such a chore. Given how it doesn't have autofocus, and while manual focus requires you to place your hand on the lens to rack focus, I often found my right hand taking on more of the weight. Placing your hand on the body doesn't really help in stable footage, which results in quick fatigue after just a couple of hours. I just felt exhausted after walking around the city with this camera, and while rigging this up, does help in capturing low ground footage. It didn't help with the extra weight added from the cage and the top handle. But worst of all is the battery life. Now, it's no news as to how BMPCCs are notorious for bad battery life, but experiencing in real life in this 6K Pro version, I couldn't get around more than 15 minutes of use, even though there is an advertised site in the website saying that it will get up to 45 minutes to even 60 minutes. And it didn't really show anywhere near to those numbers. Weirdly, I got around to 15 to 16 minutes of 6K recording. My optimistic side would like to hope it's because of a faulty battery, but it still gave me the same results after burning through 3 of these NPF 570s. So maybe there's some power issues with this specific unit I have with me, but obvious solution I could think of was to use a D-tap dummy battery paired to a V-mount to continue shooting. Not ideal if you're trying to go handheld without further accessories to support basic functioning. So what are my overall thoughts of this camera? Well, I love the image quality. The image quality that comes out of a BlackMagic camera, there's no comparing. They do really well when it comes to the image quality department, and yet I still won't pick one up because of its size. Maybe it has a lot to do with what I do personally that requires autofocus and a smaller body that is compact. But regardless, I would probably want to have one just to have a second camera if it were to be my second camera for studio shoots or even higher end productions. But as a daily driver, as a daily shooter, it's not something I would pick up. But if you're looking into image qualities alone, then the 6K Pro is something you must look at. There's also the 6K, the normal 6K version, and those will get you by as well, but you won't have the articulating screen and the options to add a EVF as well. If you buy the 6K Pro, you will get a free premium version of the DaVinci Resolve. And for $2,500, that's a bargain. I think that's why I would consider getting one, because it costs about the same as these mirrorless cameras that we normally use. I use a mirrorless camera. So that's it from me. I hope you like that review, and comment down below what you think about the 6K Pro. And if you want to see more of these cinema grade cameras, do let me know and comment down below. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.